Okay, recording it has started. So I've done multiple webinars on this topic, but today is going to be sponsored by Legend for Tutoring. The main topic is how to prepare for the current and the new PE civil exam and other items. I'm your presenter, Nabeal Khatib. I'm the CEO and the founder of Legend for Tutoring. Quickly about the Legend for Tutoring. Again, this webinar is not intended to talk about Legend for Tutoring. We will be holding other webinars about Legend for Tutoring and how Legend for Tutoring can help you and take you from, I guess, zero, all the way to pass the exam. But this is not really intended to talk about Legend for Tutoring. A quick slide about Legend for Tutoring, established about 2 years ago. We do help people mainly with the FE and the PE civil. We also teach people other courses in the STEM, I guess, categories. And we have perfect Google reviews. We have up to 160 Google reviews. And we have been doing pretty good at passing streak on the FE civil and the PE civil structural. This is just a quick summary about Legend for Tutoring. Take a minute here, or I guess seconds, to see if there's anyone has any questions. The objectives of this webinar are, number one, let's talk about the current specs, the new specs, effective April 2024, and then how to be ready for any of them, right? So if I'm taking the exam before April 1st, 2024, can I get help from this webinar? Yes, you will get the help that you need. But if you're taking it also after April 2024, you will be equipped with this webinar as well. So straightforward, concise, condensed, straight to the point. We don't want to really make a lot of loops. Straight, forward formula that we'll be talking about. Current specs, how to pass the exam if you are taking the current specs. I will be sharing with you the current specs and the new specs here shortly after I, finish the slides or during the slides, but we will be talking about something I invented alongside with the team called the 4T framework. A very simple framework. It talks about how you can be ready and equipped with this messy exam. Everyone knows when you start, preparing for this exam, you have a lot of stress. There's a lot of parameters you cannot handle, such as where to get the information from, what resources that I need to bring, where should I, refer to. There's so many things. How many, I guess, months, years, weeks that I need to prepare for this exam? What are, the good practice problems and others they're not considered good? This is going to be discussed in this webinar. So let's just, be simple and straightforward about this framework that I created called the 4T. If you really notice on the slides, there's only 3T. I put the 4th T in the bottom. That's because it's just the results of all those T's, the first 3 T's. The first one is terms. What does exactly that mean? It means basically, in a very simple way, you need to be familiar with the resources that you will be having on the day of the exam. So in other words, you have to be familiar with the handbook. If we're talking about the PE, we need to be familiar currently right now. We need to be familiar with version 1.2. Well, you're probably going to ask me a question. Where should I start? Or how can I obtain this handbook? This handbook is free. If you have access to the NCS account, you could go on the main page. There is, on the right side of the screen, it says handbook or reference materials or something. You click on it, you locate that version of the handbook, open it, and you will have full access to that handbook. It's PDF, searchable, easy to maneuver and navigate through. I guess the other question is, do I need to be familiar with all, the handbook materials? The answer is no. That is where the specs come really handy. Now we'll be sharing that later down the stretch. So that's the first T, terms, terminologies, nomenclatures, definitions that you need to be familiar with. Okay, now we know the terminologies. What are we going to do? We're going to build templates. What does that mean? Practice problems. So I want to keep that T, the pattern, the same pattern. So I said template, terms, templates. So solving the problems. A lot of people come to me and ask how many problems I should solve. There's no number. Numbers do not really matter for this exam. The more you can, the better. But you need to be very careful about the problems that you solve. Because some of them, I don't consider them good problems. Some of them, they're really good problems. And we will discuss about the criteria that would make a set of problem good versus others, they're not as good as the one that we consider good, right? Okay, I did the terminologies, I know the manuals, I know the handbook, I know everything, you're referring to. I've been practicing the problems. What else? There's one more. Time management. You can solve a problem. I believe in anyone who's taken the exam because you're smart. You accomplish so many great things, and now you're going to be taking this exam. I could see that you can solve any problem. However, there is a big enemy for you. What is it? The time. If you do the math, time that you are having on the exam, or the permissible minutes, I guess, if you want to consider that, it's only 6 minutes. If you do the math, it's only 6 minutes per each problem. For the PE, it gets worse. For the FE, it's about 3 minutes, 2.9. So you need to be efficient. You need to be careful about the problems with respect to time. So you have to solve the problems in order to obtain the passing rate. You cannot just practice the problems. You have to practice them with respect to time. You have to say, okay, here's a practice problem set. I have to add the time factor, how much or how many minutes I will take to solve this problem versus this problem, and so on and so forth. Here's a quick trick that I usually do. I start with small numbers of problems. I start with 5 or 10, and then time for myself. I could take up to 10 minutes per each problem, even 20 minutes when I start. But doing this progress, you will see that you are now capable to solve problems within less than even 6 minutes. Do not start with 40, problems. Do not start with 80 problems. I know a lot of people disagree with me and say, well, you have to mimic the atmosphere of the exam. Yes, but always start with small and then gradually build the confidence. Build the fourth T. That's the fourth T, the trust, the confidence. So if you blend all these 3 T's, you will come up with a really good formula that could lead you to pass the exam with being confident. We all know that confidence and trust is not, they're not built on one day. When you talk to someone, you cannot trust that person in only one day, or seconds or days. Sometimes it's the same thing. Compare it with the same analogy. Compare it with yourself. Building the trust needs and requires a lot of practice problems, a lot of preparation, a lot of dedication. So that's what we're talking about here. Well, I know it's the webinar is about the PE, but some of the audience will ask me, or some of the people will ask me, say, can I apply this formula for other exams, such as the FE, the CPA, whatever, right? It actually you're gonna find it very helpful to apply this formula and this framework to any exam, even for school exams. Get familiar with the terminologies, practice problems, make sure that you solve your problems within the allocated time, and then you'll trust yourself and you'll do great and you'll pass the exam with no problems. Well, that's current specs. What about the new specs? I don't think it's going to change. The format does not change. Being familiar with the manuals and the handbook, practice problems, time management, it will never ever change, right? What's going to change? Certain things. Well, we'll talk about this in the next few slides. Okay, new specs. Key to pass it. How can I pass the exam if I'm taking the new specs? Let's see. It didn't really change, right? I don't think it will change. How to prepare for the exam should not change from having, let's say, for structural, concrete design, one-way slab versus having two-way slab. The philosophy is the same, but what changes simply that your approach, not your philosophy, not your formula to pass it, or I guess for the problem to solve it correctly. Again, it's the same thing. Getting familiar with the handbook. We're talking about now version 2.0.1. For those who don't really know, the NCS has published back in October 2023 that they will make some changes for the PE civil exam. And what really affects this changes is the PE civil structural. A big impact on the PE civil structural. And the only reason why I'm saying this, with all respect to other disciplines, because now we will not see breadth on the exam. I will be talking about that, in the next, 10 or 15 minutes. So number one, terms did not change. Number two, templates did not change, and time did not change. Blend those, you'll get trust, confidence. I don't want to, speed up the webinar. I don't want to talk and feel like I'm just talking to myself. So please feel free to drop in your questions, even though that I'm, supposed to have all these questions at the end, and I'm having, I guess, a slide for questions and comments that I get from my clients or from my colleagues or from other people. But feel free to drop in your questions, while we're talking right now. I know sometimes you forget your question at the end, so feel free to drop it in the chat box. Everyone is looking for this. Everyone is looking for this slide. I know a lot of people were expecting that it's going to be as big as this, all these new changes. I don't think so. I was asked by one of potential clients that he might be joining the company, and he said, are you guys ready for the new specs? My answer was yes. And his follow-up question said, well, that's really weird that you guys are ready for the new specs, even though it was not even released yet. Well, why we are ready and why we're saying that with full confidence, because the core exam did not really change. The core topics did not really change. You might look at the specs and see, oh, there's a big change here. There's 5 pages for the old specs. Now it's 3 pages only. Oh, there's ASCE 710 versus ASCE 716. Oh, there's Ashtar 7th edition versus 8th edition. That did not really change. The codes will change, but their core, their cores do not really change. So let's look at it from a very simple perspective. Current versus the new. Current, we used to have, or now we have, a breadth portion. And then usually item 1 through 8 on the specs. And it's probably a good time to go and share the other screen with you guys. And copyright for the NCES here. On this page, it's ncs.org/exams/p exams/civil. This is where you will find all the specs that we're talking about. Be careful here. Here's exam specifications and design standards. This is the current one. There's the effective date, April 1st, 2024. I get people sometimes asking me, are you sure that it's going to be changing or that's just rumors? No, it's official. They announced it on their website back in October 2023. So let's take a look at, for instance, civil structural. And this is the specs. I was talking about the breadth, right? So this is considered the breadth. Project planning, item 1 through item number 8. You will see that these items are common for pretty much all the disciplines. I'm just going to pick another one here. There's geotechnical. Item 1 through item 8, same, are exactly the same. Well, let's take a look at the new specs. Just hold on here for a second and just make sure that everyone is aware of what's happening right now. This is the current. Now I'm going to click on this. That is the effective of the beginning April 2024. This is what we called it, the new specs. Let's look here. Analysis. Well, let's take a look at that one. Drag this, put it right here. Analysis. Okay, so item number 9 becomes item number 1. So that means we do not have breadth anymore. For certain discipline, such as structural, you will not see breadth topics anymore. However, for certain topics or for certain disciplines, such as an example, the water resources, that's the old one, versus the new water resources. Project planning, it's the current, it's the new project planning, but it's not all of them. So they're kind of mixing and matching. But for the civil structural, they got rid of all the breadth topics. Well, now you're going to ask me a question. What should I do? So can you tell me what are the topics were deleted or were, taken off from the old versus, I guess, the current, we should say, versus the new one? Very simple. All what you have to do is just visit this website, go to your discipline, transportation, and go to the new specs, transportation. If you're a person who likes to print things, you print the old one or the current one and the new one, and you start comparing between them. That's basically where you will see the differences. Well, now everyone is freaking out. Hold on, this is not going to, this is not good. They're taking off these topics. They're changing so many things. But the core topics, they did not change. They did not change. So do not be, I guess, confused and misled by people saying the entire exam is now completely changed. Yes, but the core topics, the way you prepare pretty much is almost the same, right? You can't say, oh, I'm not doing breadth anymore, so I'm not gonna prepare for the breadth. That's great. I will need to prepare, or I need to gather the manuals or the new manuals or the new codes versus the old codes. Great. The core did not really change, right? Let's go back here to the slides. And again, we're not in a race, so I want to make sure that I'm taking my time. You guys asking me questions, if there's anything that I can address, please let me know. This webinar is completely for you guys to be aware and be readily ready for the new or even the current, specs. A lot of people are lost because they don't really know where to start. And hopefully after this webinar, people will be more educated about how to prepare for the exam. So we talked about, item number 1, breadth. No breadth. Depth. All the same topics. It did not change. What changed then? What did it change? Simply taking off some of the topics, adding certain topics, but with the same core. That's number 1. Number 2, they updated, or I guess they start using the, not the newest edition of the manuals, but newer editions. I'll give you an example here. ASE 716. Now they're using 710. And again, where to find these? Just going back here to the specs. Here's a structural. I'm gonna close these so I don't confuse you guys. Here's the new one. The new one start with analysis. And the old one is number 9, analysis. Let's go to the bottom of this specs. ASCE 710. And going back here, look at the bottom, the same thing. ASCE 716. Right? So the newest edition. For those who don't know, certain manuals, they update their, I guess, contents either every 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, depends on the manual. Like for example, ASC 710, 716, 722, right? See, there's a question that we have, sounds like. I'm gonna read the summary of the question. Be included. Stephen, the answer, Stephen is asking whether they indicated if the depth topics will have greater complexity with some of the former depth items now being included in the breadth, or is the new breadth simply just expanding on the structural breadth topics that were asked prior? There's no clear evidence or talk about this. If you ask me about my opinion, I would say there will be more breadth structural questions appear on the AM session, even though there's no breadth topics on the specs. But in my opinion, instead of having one truss problem, they might have 3 truss problems. Instead of having 1 or 2 structural breadth problems, statics or a frame or zero first member stability or even mechanics of materials problems, they might have more. So, I don't know, Stephen, if that answered your question or no, but there is no, I guess, pure, evidence and pure talk and, from the NCS about it.
Yeah, that
So,
makes sense. I guess that kind of sounds like when I that's the second option I gave. Like they're kind of expanding on the breadth that was done prior, maybe. But
yep, that's what I would probably suggest, and that's what my, I guess, thoughts, towards being all depth. I know a lot of people, they're not happy with this, but again, there's pros and cons. Like, to me, I think the pros, for this is, there's, some stuff that you really don't need to know as a structural engineer for the breadth topics, but there's also bad to make the exams purely structural where your degree is civil engineering. So it's plus and minus. Okay. Go back here and just be clear. Everyone is aware of what's happening right now. The core topics did not change. No breadth anymore for certain disciplines such as civil structural. And please don't confuse yourself with saying PE structural. I get this question all the time. PE structural means SE. That's the exam that I'm preparing right now for. The second item here is the depth topics, or the, I guess, the category that they sometimes used to call the formally called PM session, which is the depth, is the same with topics, with respect to topics, newer manuals and newer codes. Okay, the second, I guess, objective, or the third objective on this webinar that I would really like to touch on, that I get always questions on: how to prepare if what? If you're taking it tomorrow, if you're taking it next week, if you're taking it next month, or if you're taking it few months later. Let's talk about each one. I want you to consider the framework, the 4T framework that we talked about earlier, in each of those, I guess, if tomorrow, next week, next month, and a few months later. But also, I want to touch on certain things that I would highly encourage people who are taking the exam in this, I guess, sequence. You're taking it tomorrow, you've done your part. You really don't need to worry about it. You've got this. Do your best. Forget the rest. Don't blame yourself. Don't stress yourself out. You did what you can. What happens, happens for a reason, and just move on. Do your best. Pretend that the AM or the breadth, I guess, if you're currently taking it, is the only exam that you'll be taking it. And if you did not do well and you're trying to take the depth portion, pretend that you will only be graded on the depth. Do not leave the exam if you think that you did not do well on the breadth. Tell you a true story about myself. I was not ready for the exam. I did not feel pretty good about the breadth when I took it. I like more structural stuff. I did not really enjoy some of these questions. That's why, sometimes I feel like excited about the new specs. But I said, no, I'm just gonna do my best. I'm gonna take the depth portion, put all what I can, and then if I passed, that would be great. If I did not, I did not give up. Do not give up. So there's nothing that you can do if you're taking it tomorrow. It's kind of funny story. I was watching the Super Bowl yesterday, and I got a call around 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 Eastern, and someone, called me and said, I'm taking the exam tomorrow. What do you think I should do? I was like, it's kind of funny that I'm having a webinar tomorrow that talks about this. Don't do anything. He's reviewing all this stuff, and I was like, don't do that. That's a lot of stress. You've already done your part. I usually do not study, 2 days at least prior to my exam. That does not mean that you do not study. It's just something that I would like to share with, you guys about, if you're interested, what should I do? Or what would you do? If Nabil is taking it tomorrow, what would, he do? I would not do anything. I would just relax, get some good time with family, to do something for fun, and just I did my part. It's over, right? That's number one. Number two, if you're taking it next week, that's a week. I could do a lot. Yes, you can, but you really don't want to do like super a lot, right? So the first thing that I would suggest, I would say review the NCS practice exam. Might have multiple copies or versions. I think, in my opinion, they're all very similar to each other. So that's number one I would do, because some of the problems on the exam, they could be similar to what the practice exam has. Number two, I would do a quick review on codes, review codes and manuals. I would review the handbook. And that might be more important to do this for the current specs, right? Because the new specs, it will still have the handbook as we talked about 2.0.1, but I think you really don't need so many of these chapters in the handbook, such as the construction, or such as the geotech, or the transportation, or the water resources if you're taking the structural. And that applies the same if you're taking the transportation or the water resources. That's what I would do. I would make sure that I have still sanity time. I do, something for fun every day. I would not stress myself out. Bottom line is always control your stress level. Do not be stressed, no matter how bad you are doing with your practice exams that you're doing every day in your, studying routine, or if you're good. Don't be very, very overconfident, and don't be not confident. There is a sweet spot in the middle. Don't stress too much, and do some practice problems. Keep reviewing the manuals and the codes. Make sure, because this is a very key, I guess, the most essential and crucial key that you will need to have in order to pass this exam is knowing the manuals and the codes very, very well. If you don't, you could potentially pass the exam, but I don't think you will be, I guess, having the good time, if that makes sense, being in your comfort zone. Not knowing the manuals very well, it could, number one, to eat up a lot of time, or gets you really stressed, because not knowing the manuals, you start looking and say, where to find this, or let me flag this problem. So many people, when they flag, they get stressed. It's kind of funny. I flagged the first 11 problems on my depth. I was a little nervous, can't lie, but still, knowing the manuals would help you get less stress. If you know the manuals, you still flag, but you could say, I'm flagging because I know this is a harder problem that I need to go back to. So what I did during my exam, I classified the flagging problems. So I said FH flag for harder problem, FT flag for time consuming problem, FN flag for no clue what I'm doing, right? So that would help. So I guess one question here, do you know if the practice exam will be updated? Yes, I think Obi is asking, do you know if the practice exam will be updated as well? They already released a new set. I looked at it and I feel like, there is some changes on the structural for sure, but there's a lot of questions that they were on the old specs, or I guess the old practice exam, I should say. But they already, if you're asking if they already released, the new or the updated practice exam, yes, they've done that on their website. So you could check that out, Obi. Okay, what if I'm taking the exam next month? The formula does not really change a lot. What changes here, number one, instead of reviewing the NCS practice problems and solving them, you need to add more problems. You're not going to solve the 80 problems from the NCS for a month. Does not make a lot of sense. So that brings me to another point. How many problems that I need to solve? Again, numbers, they don't lie, but they don't really matter here, because I could give you 1,000 problems. You get stressed, you get overwhelmed, you're probably not going to solve many of them. So buying 40, 80 problems, consistently, it would help you being on top of this. But if you need the number that I practice, I think I practice around 1,100 problems for my breadth, and I think around 700, 800 for my depth. So there's plenty of questions that you can get outside of NCS, Legend for Tutoring, School of PE, PPI, Civil Engineering Academy, PE Prepared. With all respect, there are pretty good problems out there. We'll talk about the criteria of a good problem versus not a good problem later in this webinar. Review the codes. That's the first thing that you have to do. There's one more thing that we will talk about when it's in a few months. You'll prepare some templates, but we'll hold off on this until we get to that. So review the codes, review the manuals, review the handbook. Don't be stressed. Again, that's a given. Do not be stressed. In general, we don't really do a good job if we're stressed or we're overwhelmed or we're kind of like having, I guess some problems, whether emotional problems or mental problems. Because sometimes you get crazy with this exam. I know some people there. When I was talking to one of my clients a week ago, and she was crying. She's doing pretty good, but she's crying because she's overwhelmed. Work, school, preparing for this exam. Be very, very overwhelming. So please take care of yourself. Your health matters the most. Do not overwhelm yourself, no matter what is the results of this thing that you're working for. What about if I'm preparing for the exam and I still have a few months? I'm taking the let's say the new specs. I just started preparing, or I did not really start. I'm gonna start March 1st. Just an example. What are the best tools to have in order to pass this exam? Number one, since it's new specs, we need to review the specs. What did it change? What the topics were taken off? What topics were added? I don't think that a lot of topics were added, mainly taken off, or they took off some of these topics, especially on the breadth part. Have a game plan. Have a game plan. This is very crucial. Having a game plan means a lot. Means you're being consistent with doing something every night. You know what direction you're going, you know, um, with this progress, with this process. If you're trying to, take a trip, a couple of days, even a day into the mountains, you need to prepare. Okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I need to do this. There's the cabin that I'm renting, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the same thing. There's a roadmap that you have to draw in order to accomplish. You know, I still use paper and pencil with, you know, respect to having game plans. It's kind of funny that I do pretty much most of these, on papers. I don't really type them. I only type them when I need to document them, right? But if I don't, I probably just, still have my planner that is just like pen. I say, okay, here's I'm meeting with this, I'm meeting with, this potential client, I'm doing this, there's a product that I need to submit, that so on and so forth. Having a game plan. Collect resources. What type of resources? We'll talk about that later. But collecting resources is part of the game plan if you really want to consider that. Start with the NCS practice exam. I know that sounds a little vague and ambiguous, right? What do you mean start with the NCS practice exam? A lot of people do not start with the NCS practice exam. So they start with X vendor set. What's going to happen? You look at the problems. Oh, man, this is really hard. I'm not well prepared. I'm not even near being half prepared. A lot of stuff that I need to know. That's not the level of difficulty of the exam. That's not the range that you need to know about the exam. That's a very wide range. That's very broad range. So I guess deviating from the specs, right? So you need to start with the official, the NCES, or some people kind of funny, they call them NEAS. That is what you have to start with. You cannot go and say, "Oh, I trust Legend for tutoring, for preparing, me for the FE. I'm gonna go ahead and start with them on the PE, and I take the practice exam that we created, and then start reviewing them. And it's like, okay, that's great. I'm good to go. I'm ready." No, even if you say that to me, I'll say no. You have to have the NCS first. NCS is your guideline, is your Bible, is your Quran, is whatever the holy, I guess book that you're referring to. That is your first, a go that you need to build templates. Build templates for the codes. What does that mean? I'll show you in the next slide. When I studied for the exam, especially the structural, it is so difficult to control the amount of information that you need to know for this exam. What I ended up doing, I ended up saying, I'm going to build my templates, and that's where the framework comes from. So templates, I'm going to show you here. This is what I'm talking about. Here's a steel template, or the AISC, the American Institute of Steel Construction Manual. It's part of it. Each chapter and what are the most important, tables, figures, charts, whatever, a little description. I know you're not going to memorize this. There's no way, right? But at least it will reduce and drop in the hours that you will be doing if you're searching and looking for the information that it's in this section or in that chapter in this part of the code or whatever. It summarized to you. It's a summary. It's like basically telling you how to use this chapter. What are the most important thing from this chapter? Remember when I told you the most crucial item, the most crucial key that you cannot forget, that you cannot, not bring to the exam is knowing your manuals very, very well. So that's something that I really found helpful. And I've made templates for all of the manuals, ESCE, Steel Manual, the ACI, and so on and so forth. Some of them, they're very hard to, I guess, compile and very tough to memorize. Some of them, they're not too bad. There is a pattern. I'm working right now that's on, I guess, on a side talk or note. I'm working on a book that summarize, I guess, all these manuals and some patterns to memorize the chapters. Give an example here. In ACI, in chapter 7, the one-way slab, in section 6, table 7611 talks about the minimum reinforcement. If you go to chapter 8, two-way slab, there is also 8611, talks about the minimum reinforcement. You go to chapter 9, which is the beams chapter, 9.61, it's also, or 11, it's also the minimum reinforcement. There's a pattern. Same thing with the NDS and so on and so forth. So again, what if I'm taking it tomorrow? No need to do anything. Chill out, relax. You've done your part. Taking it next week, do practice problems that within the NCS, the level of difficulty. Next month, be broad. Solve from here, solve from there, and so on and so forth. And make sure to review your manuals and codes and handbook. Be not stressed. And then if you're taking it in a few months, you'll need to build your library. There is a webinar that I guess, hold, or I did about until like 3-4 months, building your engineering library. It kind of like brings you to the same point here, right? I'm gonna stop here for a second and ask if there's anyone has any questions or comments, or if there's anything that I can do for you guys to help you better prepare for this exam, or any common questions, I guess. Okay, I did all what you told me. I prepare templates, manage my time. I did everything that you told me. What will tell you, or what would you need to tell me just a few days before the exam or throughout the journey of studying? Like what, kind of like, if you want to summarize, if you want to give me a brief summary of all your learning lessons throughout this journey, been tutoring FE and PE for the past, let's say, 5 years, combined. And I've been teaching for the past 8-10 years, between math, between civil engineering courses, structural, other courses. What would you tell me, at the end of the day, to keep in mind? Things that I would suggest you to keep in mind for this exam, and some of them actually apply for other exams, such as the FE or other professional exam, or even school exams or academia exam. Number one, try to mimic the atmosphere of the exam, time-wise. Take an exam 4 hours in a library and close the door. Make sure to not leave, except for restroom, or you want to take a, fresh air or whatever. Mimic the exam. Mimicking is great. I know that you're probably not gonna agree with me on a lot, but mimicking would give you, I always say this, mimic someone, having a mentor, having a role model, it would help you to, I guess, start from somewhere. And then you build your own um, styles, approaches, tactics, techniques, whatever you want to call it, right? So I started and I still mimic some people. I, I don't say, oh, I have done all, you know, these, I've done design, I've done this, I created the company, company's doing pretty good in 2 years. I'm not gonna mimic anyone. No, you have to have a role model. I think, in my opinion, until you're probably, you know, dying, you still have to have a role model. So mimicking is good. What about mimicking the exam? Is absolutely important. That's even more important than mimicking anyone, right? Calculator mistakes, arithmetic mistakes, very common. It's kind of funny. There's, a client that I work with. She always, do a great job and finish the problem, and no matter how hard the problem, and then do a silly mistakes on the calculator. Use the calculator that you like. Use a spare, or you take a spare calculator with you. Take two calculators. There's a calculator policy that you can find on Google if you just Google NCS calculator policy, TI-30 or whatever, Casio. There's bunch of models there. Control your stress level. If you really want to order these things, I would order them, or I would put the control your stress level number one. We get stressed pretty easily, so you got to control it, right? Do not compare yourself with others. That's I guess, a gold life lesson, not only for the exam. Do not compare. Oh, I know my colleague, she did all the breadth in 2 weeks. I've been doing, breadth for the past 3 months. She's done all the exam in a couple of months. I've been only finishing off the breadth for 3 months, so still way to go. Do not compare it that way. Your strengths are probably other people's weaknesses. Their weaknesses could be your strengths. So do not compare yourself with others. Be patient with yourself. This is something that's tough. I always strive and strive to, I guess, implement this in my life. Being patient is not easy. So be patient with your progress. Great things could take time. And then actually, certainly, they will take time, right? Be consistent with your study routine. This is a gold piece of information for preparing for the exam. If you want to do a good job, you got to be consistent. So consistency is great, not because you keep doing practice problems. No, it's because you're kind of you're training your muscle, right? Like, okay, I've got to work out today, and I've got to work out my brain as well. And instead, some people, they do this, which I found it's not a great, tip, or I guess strategy. They're like, oh, I've got Saturday, Sunday. I could do 8 hours on both of them. Well, if you're doing 8 hours and 8 hours, plus you're working 8 hours every day on weekdays, when you will have some Saturday time, what are you going to do over the weekdays? You're not going to do any practice problems? Mm-mm. I don't think that's a good strategy. I think you're having some, I guess, discontinuity, and I don't think that's great for this exam or in general. Build your confidence every day and learn from your mistakes. Don't weep on your mistakes. Don't say, oh, man, I did not do well on this exam. I've, made so many silly mistakes. That's fine. Learn from them. Build the confidence. I remember, back in the days when I start working on these stuff, I was like, well, this is gonna take forever. I'm like, I'm always making mistakes. I'm always doing this. I'm always doing that. With respect, of time or respect to time, I think you will get to a point you will laugh at yourself. I was like, oh, I used to make these silly mistakes. Now I'm pretty good with this. So learn from the mistakes. Do not be very harsh on yourself. Be patient, right? FAQs. This is a cool slide that was done by the team. I really appreciate their effort. This webinar will not be, surreal without their help. So I definitely am appreciative to the team, and they always work harder than me. So I appreciate all of them. I like these two slides. They're talking about FAQs. Where to start with my resources? Yes, we touched on this. Always start with the NCS. Very simple, very basic, right? Where to find other good resources? This is a very common question. Very common, very frequent question. Any question, here's my definition of a good practice problem. Any question that is reasonable with respect to time and in conformance with the manuals or the handbook. I should say, or not and the hand. I mean, it could be or and. But reasonable with time, up to 10 minutes, still fine. Don't bring a stiffness problem that would take 30 minutes. I don't think that's a really realistic problem, right? And don't bring me this giant equation that it's not from the manual. I don't think the NCS will, force you to memorize it. The chief officer of examination, I think, his name, if I'm Jason Gamble, I'm pretty sure his name is Jason. He said there's certain things that you have to know, but if the equation is this long, we don't expect you to know. We expect you to know 1 feet is equal to 12 inches. We expect you to know that 1 kip is 1,000 pounds. We don't expect you to remember VC is equal to square root F prime C times BW times D times lambda. No, we don't. We don't expect you to know this, right? So I'm going to repeat this one more time. I'm going to say any good problem. Look at the problems. They're reasonable with time. They're good when it comes to the manuals. They're in conformance with the manuals or the handbook. Check mark. That's a good problem right away. Right? How much time do I need to be fully prepared for this exam? I don't want to answer this question, to be honest, but I had to because this is a very frequent question. Time does not mean anything for preparation time. I prepared for my exam 5 weeks. Some people, they've been preparing for a year. Both, no problem. This is your call. If I want to say on average, 2 months to 12 months. Most of my clients, they'll be ready, within 4 months. That's the most common. I've done 3, I've done 2, I've done 6 months, I've done 8 months, I've done a year, I've done more than a year. But that's the common answer. How many hours should I study a day? Again, time. How many hours? How many months? I don't like these questions because, again, don't compare yourself with others. It depends. I would say the best answer to this question, be consistent. Weekdays, you could do half an hour, great. You could do an hour, awesome. You could do 2 hours, fantastic. Weekends, you could do 2 hours, great. 3 hours, awesome. 4 or 5 hours, phenomenal. I could do 8 hours shift, great. Remember, have some sanity time. Do not forget about yourself. Do not put yourself underwater. That is not going to be well for a longer period or for a long period. I tried it. It did not really work. What are the best ways to study and be fully prepared for this exam? It varies. Depends. But I said this so many times. Knowing the manuals very well is the most important, is the most crucial key for this exam. Control time and practice problems. What does that mean? What is this telling you? It's telling you the 4T framework. Very simple, very straightforward.
Hey,
Right?
David.
Yeah. Yes,
What
Kai.
would you say your hourly routine was when you were studying for the PE?
If you're taking the exam within a year and you want to be consistent with like a daily routine, is that what you're saying, Kai?
Yeah, so when you said you were studying for 5 weeks,
Mhm.
um, what would you say that looked like? Were you doing a couple hours a day or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I for the 5 weeks, what I was doing, since I tutor, it really helped me a lot to prepare for my exam, right? So the breadth stuff, I did not have a lot of issue with because breadth to me is equal the FE exam. And I've been, helping people with their FE for the past 5, 6 years. So I did not really take a lot of time on my breadth. Definitely depth took and eat up all the time. You know, I remember I did 3 to 4 hours on weekdays. It was pretty stressful, stressed me. And I remember I did one weekend, I did 10 hours on Saturday, 10 hours on, Saturday and Sunday. So it changes again. There's no real answer for this because the more you can give, the better. But again, don't put yourself underwater. If you're preparing for, the exam within a year or so, you know, you could, I have actually a client who, signed up recently who's doing a year. He's going to be taking it next March or next April. And we're starting next month. We're doing only once a week. And I told him to prepare yourself, even if you do, 10 minutes a day. Just be consistent. Do not break your consistency. Breaking your
Mhm.
consistency would really affect you to get back and be encouraged. There's a very common question that I did not actually ask the team to put it here. There's a lot of people come to me saying, I'm discouraged. I don't really want to study after work. I'm not having fun studying for this. Part of the reason why this happens because they told themselves they order something, and they already put the command saying, I want to take the exam next week. I want to take the exam next month. When you kind of push yourself in a certain, you put yourself outside of your comfort zone, you start getting nervous and anxious and stressed. So the key to do this is just be consistent. Being consistent does not mean to work, 3 hours a day. No, it could be 10 minutes. It could be only open the practice exam, solve one problem or two problems, done. Or open the manual. Okay, I'm gonna be studying 6.3 sections, 6.3. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, done. Closed. Especially if you're taking the exam in a year. Does that kind of answer your question, Kai?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good answer. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure, sir. Good to see you, by the way.
Yeah, you too.
Good help. Thanks for the invite. Of course, Steven. Okay. Last slide for the day or for this webinar. How should I prepare if I failed the exam once or more? I know some people, they failed the exam more than 6 times before joining me or my team. It varies. Again, most likely you got to go back to the 4T framework. Part of failing this exam is saying, I'm not a good engineer. I don't trust myself because I failed it multiple times. No, it does not. It does not measure how good you are. It's just an exam, school exam. People sometimes get nervous. They cannot control their stress level. They did not do a good job. They fail. It's simple. But if you're not doing the 4T framework, or I'm going to say either you're not practicing the problems, you're not doing the time management, you're not doing all these, items that we listed before, then you will need to do that. That's not saying, oh, I failed. Everyone fails the exam. I'll just, I need to prepare again and not implement any of these strategies or tactics or having a game plan. No, it's completely different. Saying I'm gonna die. I know that I'm gonna die in this road. I'm just gonna still drive. No, that does not make a lot of sense. You prepare yourself. You put the seatbelt and you just drive and you make sure that you're safe. And if the speed limit is 40, drive less than 40 or nearby 40. And if it's dark, you're going to make sure that you take care of yourself and take all the responsibilities that you have to do. That's the same thing. If you want to take the exam and pass it, you've got to do something. And if you did not end up passing, are usually some flaws, or again, it did not measure how good you are. You got stressed, there's so many reasons. So it definitely depends. But again, go back to the original framework. Do I need to take a prep course? The answer is yes and no. It's definitely not a must, but also if for the PE, I found it's more of a must than the FE. That's kind of interesting, right? The FE, usually people, examinees, and people who take the FE exam, usually right after school, their stuff, boom, dump all the information, right? And people, they take the PE, they're usually after 4 years or even more. A lot of the basic, that you don't really do on a day in, day out, you forget. So could be yes, could be no. I like personally to do one-on-one. Some people like to do on demand. Some people like to do group studies. That's your choice. Again, the webinar is not intended to talk about what the Legend for Tutoring offers, or what we do. It's probably just a brief, quick summary about the Legend for Tutoring and some, I guess, stuff that you will need, to barely know Legend for Tutoring. There's a question about Legend for Tutoring. I think that's the only question in the FAQs, question about Legend for Tutoring. What type of packages that the Legend for Tutoring offers? Normally we offer the review package, the breadth and the depth, and the combination of both. 15, 30, and 50 hours package. We might be doing different packages with the new specs, but I think, generally speaking, numbers again do not tell the whole story. What makes the Legend for Tutoring a good resource for this exam? Not only the Legend for Tutoring. If you need to take a prep course, you definitely want to make sure to consider the following. We help as Legend for Tutoring, and other companies, they do as well, with online and offline. I'm going to, just, hold on here a second for saying online and offline. Online, obviously, clearly. Offline, we do care about our clients. If they're stuck outside, we will help them. Not just say, oh, we'll meet on Monday at 5 o'clock, whatever, and then see you later next week. No, we do not do that. We usually are pretty good with follow-up. And one thing that you really want to consider, no matter if you want to sign up in a prep course at Legend for Tutoring or the School of PE or the PPI, they're all great resources. You want to make sure that they are aware of the CBT format. You want to make sure that they're up to date. I get this comment a lot. You guys way ahead than other companies with the CBT. Yes, we are. Not because we are great. No, because I took the CBT and it makes my life way easier to know all the details. If I took the paper and pencil, it might not be as good as right now, right? So definitely, we want to make sure everyone is aware of the format, whether the current CBT, again, CBT stands for computer-based test, or the new CBT. Can I fail after all of that? The answer is absolutely yes. Obviously, you could take the exam, be fully prepared, and still fail the exam. Is that common? No. Does that happen? Yes. It did happen? Yep. Why? It is very hard to control your results. It's very hard to control your stress level. It's very hard to know what's going to happen during the exam. But please keep in mind that the exam does not measure how good you are. Or it say, oh, if you passed, you're a great engineer. If you did not pass, no, you cannot be an engineer. I know great mentors. They took the exam multiple times and they now have their PE, or the two recognition, or two-letter recognition after their name. They're doing great, but they failed it multiple times. So failing is not an indicator whether you are good or you're bad. That's absolutely not. I failed certain classes. No problem. I admit it. What is the problem with that? You learn from your mistakes. Just say, oh, I'm great. I'm infallible. I can't fail. Nope. That is not true. Everyone makes mistakes. The smarter people, they learn from their mistakes. And I do want to encourage you to go to the NCS website, or you could even go to the YouTube channel. Bunch of videos, how to flag items, design codes in the standards library, some other things about the CBT, especially if you are a person who took the paper and pencil for your FE, or you took your paper and pencil for your PE, and now sadly you're repeating and you're trying to take this exam again. Flagging is one of the tools that I found really helpful. Do not waste your time, flag the problem, and move on. Remember, you are doing a great job with what you're doing right now, having a full-time job and studying for this exam, whether right now or in the future. That is a great accomplishment. I really think that you could do this. If so many people already did it, you're going to be the next person to do it. I also encourage you to go to our website and check it out if you would like to know more about us. And again, this is not intended to talk about Legends for Tutoring. We will do that. But if you want to know, more about us, here's our website. You could just type in Legends for Tutoring and read about us in the Google reviews. And with that being said, I will need to turn it to the last slide and say, if there's any questions, any comments, any concerns that I can address before we call it good for the night, please do so. Well, I appreciate your coming here and making it on Monday. And I know it's Monday night, especially for those who are on the East Coast. Thank you very much. We appreciate your service and we appreciate your coming here. And I will talk to you whenever you guys need me. Thank you very much for attending, and you guys have a great, night.
Thank you, Newton.
Appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
guys. Uh-huh.
See ya.
See ya. Stop recording.